Уважаемый господин премьер-министр,
Distinguished Prime Minister, ladies and gentlemen, dear friends and colleagues. From the start, I'd like to note that the visit of the Chairman of the Council of Ministers of Italy, Mr. Matteo Renzi, has been very dynamic, very full on the agenda. We, first in the restricted format, have had a detailed discussion on the key issues of our bilateral cooperation. After that, there have been negotiations in the extended format with the participation of the members of the government and the good representation of the business environment, of the business community. Together with Mr. Matteo Renzi, we have discussed all the range of our bilateral issues. Our meetings on the margins of large economic events are becoming a good tradition. A year ago, on the 10th of June, we were opening the Days of Russia at the World Universal Exhibition Expo 2015 in Milan. And now we are receiving Italy as the main guest of the St. Petersburg International Economic Forum. The personal participation of Mr. Renzi in this event has ensured the higher representation of Italian business community. On the margins of the forum, with the participation of business in Italy, there have been contracts signed from on the sum above 1.3 billion euros, the largest, billion of dollars. I'd like to know that Italy is fifth of the foreign trading partners of Russia. In 2015, the mutual turnover has fallen down, and this downfall has continued at the beginning of this year. It is understandable that the economic situation changes played a role in it, and as well as the political limitations of various kinds. During our negotiations, we gave additional attention to finding some steps to boost our economic cooperation. We understand all the difficulty of this task, but we will be consistently and consecutively working on its solution. And we see the reciprocal readiness to normalize business contacts from our Italian friends. During our negotiations, we have shown the mutual set on reviving the mechanisms of bilateral practical cooperation. The strategic areas of Russian-Italian cooperation remain energy, but because Italy is one of the largest consumers of the Russian natural gas last year, despite a downfall in prices, we have augmented the physical supplies by 12%. The Russian and Italian energy companies continue working on joint large-scale projects. You have seen the contracts that have been signed, Rosneft and Novatek on our behalf, which means development of energy infrastructure, exploration, extraction and processing, refining of oil, transportation of the LNG. We are also speaking about manufacturing of modern equipment for fuel energy complex in Russia. We see great prospects for localizing the manufacturings of the Russian companies on the Russian territory. We have seen during negotiations that our Italian partners are interested in that. We see good opportunities for expanding our inter-regional links and cooperation in high-tech industries like aircraft building and space. You have witnessed the signing of the relevant documents, but that work has not been done from scratch because the company in a mechanic, for example, is well known in Russia. It has been working for a long time in our market and it has good reputation. We have been speaking today about how we can expand our cooperation and make it more sustainable. Russia and Italy are together exploring the near-Earth space. Now we are training an Italian astronaut to be a part of the International Space Station crew in 2017. The Italian companies are active in implementing large-scale infrastructural projects in Russia. For example, here in St. Petersburg, Italian partners are constructing a western speed diameter I'm also speaking about the Moscow-St. Petersburg Federal Highway and the Federal Highway M5 in the Chelyabinsk region. We are also developing our dialogue in the humanitarian sphere. The Prime Minister, during our negotiations, took great focus on that. Our countries make a significant contribution in protection of the global cultural heritage, and we agreed to have closer cooperation and coordination of the efforts of our experts on maintaining and preserving the memorials of the Syrian Palmyra. In our international agenda, we took great attention to terrorist threat because Russia and Italy share the view that only with the common efforts of the world community can we find the adequate response to this global challenge. Of course, we have also touched upon the settlement of issues in Ukraine, in Syria, and in other spots and regions where the things are not yet calm. I'd like to note another circumstance. Italy has traditionally been, due to historical reasons, involved in the events in the north of Africa, in particular in Libya, and we have discussed this matter with the Prime Minister in detail. In conclusion, I'd like to thank again our partners for their interest and their constructive dialogue and express a hope that all the plans that we've been discussing today will be implemented. Thank you.
Signor Presidente Vladimir Putin.
Mr. President Putin, cordial thanks for the invitation here today. For us, Italy, it was an honor and a pleasure to be here, to be a guest at this forum, to be among the guests of this 20th St. Petersburg International Economic Forum. I would like to once again extend my gratitude to the organizers, to the hosting city, and I would like to underline the quality and the level of our discussions. This is a new contribution to our bilateral relations. As for our participation, this is our 5th meeting between us and Russia. We had a meeting in Milan, in Turkey during G20. Well, it's actually our 6th meeting. I forgot about Australia. During all these meetings, we tried to work together across the board, as we did today. And I'm grateful to President Putin for his delicacy in the issues of Northern Africa, which are a priority for us. Those challenges of international scope that we managed to discuss, we're also discussing in public. That means that we accept that we have differences as for a European and international geopolitical agenda. Nevertheless, we had an opportunity to have an honest and a very deep discussion, and I hope that it was a fruitful one as well. As for our bilateral relations, on our side, we have underlined our ideas that Mr. Putin has just highlighted in his speech. The greatest importance of our energy partnership and all the consequences for our companies, for the whole ecosystem of our companies, not only for separate ones. We also see the opportunities in agriculture. We would like that our model of work that was, and then the focus that was made on the work in the agricultural sphere would lead to mutually beneficial steps forward. As for scientific research, as Mr. Putin has said, and overall in all the issues that my counterpart has just mentioned, our position is that indeed building bridges instead of walls is of strategic significance. I'm saying that because the Italian journalists took part in this forum today, and they saw that Astaldi is working so great. They almost finished the building the 14-kilometer-long bridge here in St. Petersburg almost on time. And I hope that President Putin will do the opening ceremony in a few weeks. And I also hope that it's not only an infrastructural issue, this is also a very symbolic gesture. Today, we need to renew building bridges together. One more detail here. Not every day you're being told that the Italy team has scored on the 98th minute from President Putin, as has happened today. And I hope that it brings good luck to the Italian national team. The next game will take place on Tuesday, and I hope for very good news from you. Well, jokes aside, I hope that it will also bring luck to Russia in organizing the championship in 2018.
А сейчас российские и итальянские журналисты смогут задать по 2 вопроса господину премьер-министру.
And now we have 2 questions coming from Italian and Russian journalists each.
Per la RAI.
Mark Innaro della RAI da Mosca. Una domanda a entrambi, se possibile.
The question goes to both leaders, please. Acknowledging the fundamental role of Russia in searching for solutions, about mutually acceptable solutions to all international issues, starting with Iran nuclear program and finishing with the Syrian military actions. Can we believe that Russia will be involved in finding solution for Libyan issue as well?
Ne parliamo da tempo, la Russia è già impegnata con la comunità.
We have been talking about it for quite a long time. Russia is already working with the international community. Russia is not only a large, a major international power, but it's also a country, one of the countries that always are meeting in the UN Security Council. So, in regard to Libya, everything is going through President Putin's and Minister Lavrov's table, and they have great relations with their Italian counterparts. I believe that right now the idea is to diffuse the tensions on the territory of Libya and to get to a government that could govern, that could influence the reality, and finally bring peace to the nation that went through the invasion, which was probably not the best version of the best scenario. Probably it was an erroneous military invasion, and we hope that these people can finally achieve peace. We have looked for a Russian involvement, and Russia has never denied an engagement. I would like to join the estimates of Mr. Renzi about the erroneous actions and about other scenarios in the region, but I agree that here we should not look back, but rather look forward in finding solutions. Situation is indeed very tough. The government, the parliaments, the military groups, the tribe interests, ethnical and other interests, it's very hard to bring it to one least common denominator. And I welcome the words of Prime Minister that Russia will continue to work to the best interests of Libyan people according to international law, but in order not to bring some kind of discord in the international work, but rather to get to a solution that will be acceptable for all. We'll continue with the Russian journalist. The channel 1, please. At the opening of the forum, ex-president of France, Nicolas Sarkozy, was talking about sanctions, and he said that, in his opinion, Russia should make the first step and to abolish countermeasures which were introduced as a response to European sanctions. He said that the strong partner stretches out his hand, so the Russia should start accommodating European partners. How would you comment that? Would you see this compliment as the strong partner, as a as a very contradictory compliment. There are different kind of countries. There are smart, there are shrewd countries, strong and not so strong countries. Mr. Sarkozy is treating our country with warm feelings, and we can say that he's a proponent of reinstatement of EU and Russian relations. We had a very long discussion about it during our meeting the day before yesterday. I believe that his proposition is constructive, and that's why we should pay attention to it. We would be ready for such steps if we were sure that we would not be deceived once again, that behind these unilateral actions would be the actions of Europe in response. Otherwise, it would be one step forward, two steps back, as it's widely known. But who can convince us that our partners are indeed aiming for such type of work? It's hard for me to tell right now, but I believe that right now it's not us that should be convinced, but our partners in Kiev should be convinced that they have to implement those obligations, those apparent obligations under Minsk agreements. I don't even want to talk about it. It's not a secret agreement. You can look in the internet. You can see the whole text of the Minsk agreement. What's written there? By the end of 2015 to amend constitution. But we cannot do that for the Kiev politicians. The amnesty law was adopted, but it was not signed into force. I'm not the president of the Ukraine. I cannot sign this law into force. To implement the special status law, it was adopted, but it did not enter into force by a very shrewd method. One more amendment, Article 10, was adopted, so the whole law was postponed. So it's very apparent, but we cannot be responsible for what we cannot be responsible. I understand that it's not easy to make such decisions in the Ukraine right now. It requires a lot of political courage and support from the population and from the main political forces. But if you have signed the document, you have to follow up on it. But our European partners understand that, but they should not give us the whole responsibility for the current events, especially on those issues that are outside of our responsibility. They should work with their allies in Kiev if they truly want and wish peace to Ukrainian people. They have to get out of that spiral. They have to start the direct dialogue between Kiev, between conflicting parties. And if at some point we see that everything is done, we'll be the first to make the step, including some restrictory measures in trade and economic sphere.
Paolo Valentino del Corriere della Sera.
Paolo Valentino, Corriere della Sera.
Presidente Renzi, l'Italia è stato il paese che ha
Mr.
avuto...
Prime Minister Renzi, Italy was the country which reflected more on sanctions. For example, by having achieved the non-automatic prolongation of sanctions. And every time when it was time to prolong the sanctions once again, and the Italian business has made another statement that the sanctions would not be prolonged not by 6 months, but by 3 months. What do you think about this proposition, so that the date of the next renewal of sanctions would come closer? And Mr. Putin, one more question for you as well. I wanted to ask you, Russia has good relations with a number of parties and movements of Eurosceptics who do not support the political integration. This is the Hungarian movement and the National Front of Marine Le Pen in France. So my question is, do you prefer to conduct dialogue with a strong, integrated Europe, with a united voice, or with a weaker, more disintegrated Europe, so to speak? Thank you.
La posizione italiana è molto...
Italian position is very simple. Sanctions are not prolonged automatically as if it is business as usual. President Putin has expressed his stance multiple times, and it is the longer the sanctions, the longer we have to work to find solutions. But the fundamental issue is either there is an idea on what is happening, and there are political discussions inside the European Council, or the sanctions turn into a routine matter and counter-sanctions as well, due to those reasons that President Putin has just explained. So I hope that at the next meeting of the ambassadors in Brussels, we would ask that the sanctions to be discussed during those negotiations, for sanctions not to be prolonged automatically, and to see where are we standing on implementation of the Minsk agreement. As President Putin has said, Minsk agreement is not a secret document. You can look it up. So we have to state what was done by whom and according to which schedule. In this case, the foreign minister will conduct a discussion on this matter. But the central issue is that all sides are urged to implement the Minsk Protocol. We do that with our European partners responsible for this project. We do that with our Russian friends and with our Ukrainian ones as well. And we tell them quite clearly, as President Putin has said, that the Minsk agreement should not be implemented in just one direction, but in all directions. That is a very serious stance, and it's very coherent. We have said that since the very day one. Thank you. About your question. It was a very complicated question, and the part of that question is a constatation of the fact. It's the statement of a common idea in Russia that Russia ostensibly supports some nationalist parties and has some special relations with them. For about 10 years now, I have been telling my European friends that considering the policy that they're conducting, the growth of popularity of nationalist parties and movements is unavoidable. As the inflow of refugees and migrants is increasing, that is what is happening, and we have nothing to do with that. So you have to ask all those responsible in Europe for this matter. We understand it's a very delicate humanitarian issue. The people running away from war do need help. But by providing assistance to them, every country should have the interests of its population in focus. We're not going to interfere in these issues, and we work with all forces in Europe, those at the helm of the government and those in the opposition. That's one thing. The second part is due to the so-called Brexit problem, and you want me to say what the Russian position is, whether Russia wants to talk to a strong Europe or to a weak Europe. Of course, Russia wants to talk to a strong Europe, because talking to a weak partner is not worth it. This partner can be influenced from outside, and all agreements and joint plans will be thrown away. A strong partner would not allow such an interference from outside. But what is a strong Europe? This issue has to be thoroughly analyzed by you, not by us. if the Europe will be strong, if the Great Britain votes for staying in Europe. Some experts say that Russia will be more concentrated if they say no. Some say that it's the first step towards disintegration of the rest of Europe, and so on. Of course, I have my own opinion in this regard. Yesterday and the day before yesterday, we talked a lot about it with my European colleagues. I heard a lot of different views, different stances. I will not announce my opinion publicly today. I believe that we should treat with respect the choice of the people of Great Britain, whatever the choice is. We still have to wait for it to happen. And the last question for this press conference, RIA Novosti. Thank you. Lena Glushakova, RIA Novosti. Mr. Prime Minister, congratulations with the Italian national team going into playoff round. But I wanted to ask you, Italy has traditionally been a very reliable partner for Russia, including such project as transporting more gas to Europe. The Southern Stream was put on hold, and then the Turkish Stream. The question is Italy still interested in increased procurements of gas to Europe? What do you think about implementation of other projects which could be compared to Southern Stream and the Turkish Stream? Italian partners, of course, are showing interest to continuous cooperation, including in infrastructure. We have discussed it in detail today. We talked about those mistakes which were made by us in the past and talked about how to address it in the future. What is of interest to us today and in a midterm perspective? That's working further in the southern direction. As you know, Gazprom and the Italian counterpart and the Greek one as well signed a memorandum on finding such joint projects and solutions. We talked about Nord Stream 2. I'm not going to hide it. There is nothing secret about it. We discussed it as well. We talked about this expansion of our cooperation in other spheres of energy sector. As a matter of fact, not a single issue is off the table for us. We're ready to cooperate, but we expect that our European, including Italian partners, would also have the same attitude and will work together on implementation of those plans that we have on our agenda. There are a lot of them. Today, you have seen that many documents were signed today, in very large-scale documents. For example, on Yamal project or Rosneft cooperating in Barents or in the Black Sea. That is also in regard to infrastructure. Gazprom will continue to work with Eni. Overall, we're satisfied with the progress, but as for some hardships, the third energy package from the European Union, I think that with time we'll find solutions to these difficult issues as well.
Avendo parlato per circa 4 ore, in qualche momento ci è capitato anche di parlare di energia.
We have talked about 4 hours together, and of course we talked about energy a lot as well. Italian position is the following. We have traditionally been friends with the Russian government, as President Putin has reminded us. Some documents signed here today make sense, and they attest to the fact what is happening in our relations. We have signed agreements worth more of 1 billion euros. Potentially, these agreements are opening up partnership for about 4 or 5 billion. So it is apparent that we have discussed this sphere. In the past, we had some difficult topics, and I would prefer for the Southern Stream to continue, but that did not happen. The responsibility does not lie within Russia or Italy. I'm looking at this issue in the following way. In the next 20 years, going back to my previous intervention, Russia will have a few spheres of cooperation, and I'm ready to bet that the energy sector will remain a priority. And using common sense, as President Putin has said, the solutions will be found. There are some necessary efforts coming from Russian government and the European as well. In the end, I'd like to say, so it will be very clear in the European context as well. Today, in the end of his speech, President Putin is more European than I, because he has said that Europe might experience difficulties, but I think that Europe has the future if it is betting on the future. And I think that we have made a small step forward in this direction. Thank you.